Awesome. Thank you so very much. Welcome each and every one of you coming today. My name is Dr. Amina Ali, and I will be hosting you today. And we will be talking about the greatness of who we are together as a people. And today, in celebration of National Hispanic Heritage Month, we have none other than our very own Queen Mother, Professor, what would you say, Professor Mama?
Professor Mama Cat.
Mama Cat, and we have her here. She is someone that is near and dear to the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights, and we are going to speak to her today in the grandness of a day in the life of the Cuban Mission. And this is going to be a question and answer. We're going to have I'm going to be the moderator, and we're going to bring in a few topics that we are most definitely interested in. For those of you that are coming in from Fordham University, welcome, welcome. We have NYU that is here on the live stream as well. Thank you so very much for coming, and thank you, professors, for logging them in and in on time. We also have Madam Maritza, and we have, is it Aoife? Yes.
Effia.
Effia, thank you. Welcome, welcome, and thank you so very much for joining us. We're going to host this for about 1 hour, and we're going to give a greatness for what it is that we are going to look for in the up and coming transitory work that is going to be happening in Cuba. We have some students that are going to be going over in the summer, and they were just really interested in the lay of the land. So we're going to be asking some questions to Queen Mother. We're also going to be averaging what it is the analytics are going to look like as far as programming and planning, and then be able to set into motion that which it is that we can do here in the United States for the mission there in Cuba. So without further ado, I'm going to ask if, let's see, let's see, I was going to ask Queen Mother, but I don't want to do it. We're celebrating her. So I'll just go ahead and just open us up in a meditative prayer for all beliefs. Father God, we open up today thanking you for the goodness, for the graciousness, for the understanding, and for the togetherness. We thank you for our abilities, our mobilities, our mental and physical agilities, our cognitive dexterities, and the understanding of what it is that we have come to do today. May the goodness of this mission, this work, and her voice be of echo to the mission that we have in humanity today. For this, I ask in all of the names that you are called. Amen, amen, aho, ashe, and so it is. Selah. Thank you so very much for all of you that are coming. Yes, thank you. Thank you so very much. Assalamu alaikum to those that are here. And I am opening today with a little bit of a background on the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. As I mentioned, I'm Dr. Amina Ali. And the Federation is a social impact organization that is designed and divined to be advocacy, education, and subsidy for gender and human rights solutions. And we travel the globe. We have embassies that are located in Africa. We have one for the African Union, United Nations, and of course, ECOWAS, that is going to be planning and implementing the recognition from the United Nations, and those that are supplementing us in the European Union as well. And we have a mission, and that is to bring forth solutions for gender and human rights. We equally have our new university, Harbor Heritage University, which is the one and only higher learning educational standard for gender and human rights, and it is recognized by the mission of the SDGs at the United Nations and the African Union. We are fully accredited in Dubai, the United States, and we have programs in associates, bachelor, master's, and 2 PhD programs. One is professional chaplaincy, and the other one is a PhD in gender and human rights. Brand new, first of its kind. We are pioneering each of these missions. It is led and run by a woman of color, a veteran, and someone that is designed to bring this to different accolades of people, but the main goal is inclusion and accessibility. So I thank you so much for coming. For those of you at Fordham, we have Fordham Law, we have Fordham Poli-Sci, and we have Fordham, who else is there? Communications and journalism. In NYU, we have of course, law students, poli-sci, psychology, and we have sociology students that are here today. And all of them are interested in making the trip to Cuba to open up help and the durability of the Cuban mission. So without further ado, Queen Mother, I ask that you come on, and as I believe you elevating your voice to speak to you, by you, because of you, give us about 20 seconds to a minute of who you are, what you are, and what you have come to bring. And I know that minute is going to be an hour long, so if we could give a little bit of you for all that you do and all that you are before we jump into our questions, please.
That is so funny. I probably spent a lifetime figuring out, like most of us, but now that I'm really at that age, over 70, it's that time of reflection, like, who am I? And what do I do? Yeah. And how do I walk in the world? And how have I walked in the world? And it's the culmination right now I think I have really grown into a mama. Yes. Into accepting that role as something that's not less than, but being a midwife and having a midwife perspective, it's enabled me to see the world through someone who helps it be born. Yeah. And that's a lot of roles. I mean, it takes a lot. Like any woman knows, you have to do it all in order to get that one thing done that's important on any given day. And so I would say that this moment right now is the culmination of all the things that this little girl that was born on the Mississippi Delta in Arkansas has done. Every step I've taken to get me to this point of considering myself a global citizen, a mama of this now generation all over the planet, with sisters, like I have sisters I see on this call, and feeling like I belong. At this moment, I'm very content and happy and feeling like I'm nesting. And we know that when a woman is nesting, she's ready to give birth.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm going to use that. She's nesting. Thank you, Queen Mother, because that is that's where I want to go. I'm nowhere near an elder yet. I'm not ready. My mouth is anyway, but I know that I am
baby elder. You're an elder in training.
Okay, yes, please. Did a lot of training for 20 years. Okay.
But you're a good student. I love me some you.
Thank you. And that's the point I'm making, that I need you in my life, because you are the rock, you are the foundation, you and the other your sisters that are here on the call, that are modeling that have done the work, that have the wisdom, and the ones that can impart it to hardheads like myself that are still trying to be young in mindset, but still trying to lay her foundation in reality. And I think being under you as an apprentice, I'll always be an apprentice midwife, especially with mindsets like yours in the room. But doing that for 30 years, I can honestly say that this part of the journey is truly the one that I've looked forward to. Like you said, every step we took, and being in allopathic medicine, and then the last 15 years being in naturopathic medicine, I can say that they didn't take it seriously. You know, they didn't think naturopathic medicine was a thing. You know, they always thought it was just like junk science or alternative medicines or whatever. But now they realize that this is a great fortitude. And knowing that I was a part of that, even for a few years, allows me to know that nesting has great twigs in it, you know, and it allows me to see that I'm sitting in that. So thank you. Thank you for conferring that, and thank you for allowing that wisdom to come forth. So I am excited. I'm excited to have you. I'm excited to know you just came back from Cuba, not even a month ago, and you just came back with great energy, great programs, great products of conception that we are going to put forth. But I want you to speak on the belly of this, and we're going to talk about the round of this baby? How did this baby sit in your womb right now? So the first question is, how did you come to work in Cuba? What drew you to this beautiful land? And tell us your story of your Cuban migration.
Okay, this is my Cuba story, and I think it has two parts, maybe three.
Okay.
Um, the first part is people who know me kind of assume that I am the birthing project. I am actually retired from the birthing project in the last year, and it is quite the ordeal and the assignment to extricate what's me from what is this thing called the birthing project. But the birthing project, I'm part of those mamas like Sophia Monroe and Nankululeka, God bless her, Salama, Mama Salama, that it was a wave of awareness around what was happening with maternal and child health in our country. This was before there's like now a full-blown movement and a full-blown awareness, and there's data and there's funding and there's all this stuff. The Birthing Project was actually the first African American grassroots community-based maternal and child health project that was funded in the United States. I see Sister Fia on the line, and she's the director of the Baltimore Birthing Project. So there have been about 113 birthing projects globally in the 36 years that the Birthing Project has been in existence. And the Birthing Project was just really an opportunity to give ourselves permission to be our sister's sister and to be with them and figure out what was going on, to support them during this time of pregnancy and birthing and parenting. Ironically, by profession, I'm a big picture fiscal administrator, which is as far away as people could imagine me at this moment. I'm embarrassed to say I literally started the Birthing Project when I was a big picture fiscal administrator for the state of California many years ago. And it was just costing the state of California way too much to keep babies alive because they were sick many of them were sick when they were born. Many of them were taken from their parents when they were born. And so the idea of a baby being born and costing so much money just to be born because it was sick, and then costing so much money to take care of that baby until it became old enough to leave foster care, and then repeat that pattern all over again. That was my assignment. I was a part of the governor's think tank at one time. That's another whole story, when Governor Brown came in to rethink California. Congresswoman Maxine Waters is my big sister. I should say that in the beginning, the middle, and the end. And people who are in places of power that open doors for you are people that you should always salute, honor, and remember. And she put me in that position. And so my job was to try to figure out what we could do to save money for the state of California. And my idea of saving money for the state of California was to ask women who could negotiate the systems that it takes for especially a Black person to navigate in order to have a healthy baby. I wanted to see if that would reduce the cost. And the first baby that was born that I was matched up with, that baby died. His name was DeAndre. And that was the moment I realized it was more than a job. Because in addition to helping my mom, Frances, the baby's mom, my little sister in the project, negotiate the system when her baby died, I had to demonstrate to her also what you do when your baby dies. And until I held her dead baby in my arms to show her she could say goodbye to her baby, I didn't realize that all that data that we had meant counting dead babies. And when we thought about it, if we counted the number of soldiers that had died in World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and Korea, we actually had buried more babies than soldiers in the last century. He lived 10 days, rocked my world, and changed my life. Within a year after his birth, I had walked away from the state of California, haven't had a job since. But that was really when the Birthing Project was born, from being an idea to being something that had a life. And there was a calling to women that all of us could do that. We didn't need any degrees. We didn't need anybody to anoint us, appoint us, pay us, or whatever. We loved our sisters, and we were willing to do that for one woman. That was the birthing project. That's a part of my story to get to Cuba. The other part of my story to get to Cuba, that got me to Cuba, was, some of you are old enough to remember Elian, that little boy whose mother died in the crossing, leaving Cuba, trying to get to Florida. And the big whoop-de-doo that happened because the relatives of that child in Florida did not want the child to be sent back to Cuba, where he had a father and other family. And when the grandmothers in Cuba came to the United States to ask for their child, we treated them horribly. And as a grandmother, all I could think about was how I felt, and it wasn't even my baby. So that was a part of the story. And the other part of the story, going back to the first part, having the birthing project meant I had to help a woman. Our organization had to help a woman go through pregnancy, birth the baby. And because of the women we were working with, we had to fight the Children's Protective Services system to get those babies to be able to stay with their mothers and give their mothers the support they needed in order to keep their babies. Because from any way you look at it, when a woman loses a baby, her first instinct is to replace that baby. So at that time, and even now, we have mothers in the system that have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 babies, because they keep having a baby until they could keep a baby. And so part of the work was harder. It was harder to fight the system than it was to help that woman birth that baby. And so there was a weekend when all of this came together, when I had to go to court and fight for a woman to get her baby and back. And then when the judge said, give that woman back her baby, I remember just sitting under a tree and crying and saying, I can't do this anymore. As it turned out, a week later, I found myself in Cuba because Elian's grandparents had invited Maestra, a group of women who work with women in war-torn countries, and the Birthing Project was the only US project that was a part of Maestra, because I consider being Black in the United States in certain communities as being in a war-torn country and having to go through the same ordeals that other people go through, not as in a different way, let's put it that way, but we were having really bad outcomes for our babies. So Elian's grandparents wanted a group of grandparents in the US to come and see how children live in Cuba, because part of the legality of getting him back was the concept that we in the United States have of how terrible life must be in Cuba. Like, why would you send the kid back to Cuba? So these grandparents invited grandparents from the US to come and see. Well, I did not know anything about Cuba except Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. I thought that was Cuba to me. And so I went there with this just a blank page, like not knowing anything at all. And that was how I was introduced to Cuba and actually seeing a world that I had never even envisioned. By the time I left, 2 weeks later, I had actually found out while I was there that Fidel Castro had actually given the United States 500 medical school scholarships. And the Birthing Project had a clinic, the only one of its kind in the country, run by grassroots community-based women of color, but we were all midwives. We could not afford to hire a doctor. And when the medical students would come and volunteer at our clinic, they would say as they were leaving, when I'm a real doctor, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to work. I'm going to work with y'all. I'm going to help you do this work. But when they graduated, they owed at least $300,000. They could not come work for the Birthing Project. They had to go work for someplace where they could make enough money in order to pay their loans back. So you can rest assured that when the first group of those students got to Cuba, I was there waiting for them. So that is my story of how I got to Cuba.
I was getting ready to talk and I'm muted. Thank you so much. I have, you speak about a lot. And of course, you and I got together from the Birthing Project when I touched the hem of your garment years ago. And I was smitten, and knowing where I came to California to be at another project. And of course they didn't have, and one of my girlfriends said, well, let's go over here to the Birthing Project. And I was like, what? And that was when I found out about it in California and didn't know about it. And it has to be about 15, maybe 16 years ago. And I know that we hadn't worked since, because I was so in awe of you that I just was so intimidated. But I think knowing that is to know that a lot of what it is that you did was the foundation of the clinic that I ran and the street prenatals that I had, and going to the women. And I was shunned out of quite a few hospitals because I was taking my Doppler and going to the cardboard boxes and listening to heartbeats. And they were telling me that was out of my range and scope, and I can lose my license and can't, as a doctor, you can't attend home births and all of the things that, I was getting scrutinized for. And then they wanted to say that because I was doing that, that I was of detriment to what it is that women need. And I said, well, first do no harm is what I raised my hand to, first do no harm. So if you're not doing harm, then you have to be helping in some way, or at least leaving them alone. Well, I'm not going to leave them alone. And you taught me that there's better ways. There's more than one way to skin a cat. And I think that was the greater wisdom that I can honestly say came from that meeting, that there's a different way that you can do it. If you can't physically meet them where they are, you go to them. And I think that that is something that I'm going to always take with me, even when I begin to mentor and bring people under my wing, maybe 30 years from now. But I think that there is going to be women that are going to be able to hear that and to hear the ancestry of that you meet women where they are, and you give them what they need, not what you want them to have. And I think that's the bigger piece that I took from you, that you give them what they need. So question 2 speaks to that. Tell us a little bit more about the Cuban maternal care and fetal morbidity and mortality rates compared to the US. And speak about how safe it is to birth there than actually in the United States. I really want you to hone in on that part, please.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm wearing this jacket for a reason, because a lot of people think you could not go to Cuba. So first of all, they say, oh my God, you went to Cuba, how did you get there? Because there is just a myth, an urban myth that people in the US cannot travel to Cuba. But the truth of the matter is Cuba is probably one of 3 countries that people in the United States need a license to travel to. And so I travel on a research and education license. I will bore you to death with anything you want to know about Cuba. And I have been going, the medical school I started accepting US students in 2001. So this is 2023. I have been in Cuba that long. So that's a lot of research. But my first research project was basically the question that you asked, because I could not believe that Cuba had better birth outcomes than the United States. I didn't go to a historically Black college. I went to UCLA. So I thought the United States was number 1 in everything. And actually, my master's degree is in international public health. And I went representing the community that I lived in at that time, which was Compton and Watts, as a developing country, because people in those countries, in my neighborhood, were dying from the same things people were dying from in developing countries, and that should not have happened. So I was a part of that first group actually, I should say this too. I am part of the first group of EOP students in the country when all the universities were at risk of losing their federal funding if they did not have affirmative action, which I say that now because of the battle that we're having in our country about affirmative action. and also the battle that we're having about women's health care. Those two things kind of go together. But I moved out of living in the bus station in Oakland with 2 children onto the campus of UCLA. So that is really my background into this and my perspective of all the information and education that I have gotten. So when I was in graduate school, I could not believe that the United States was like number 14 in terms of birth outcomes. I thought they were lying because the United States had to be number 1 in everything. And it was very, very hard for me to understand that. But by the time I got to Cuba, I saw that the United States was behind every developed country in the world in terms of getting our babies here and living to age 1. And Cuba was the country that was right ahead of us. It was like the USC-UCLA war. It was like, how could Cuba have better birth outcomes than the United States? And how could the United States be behind every developed country on the planet? Actually, when you looked at it and how if Black people in the United States were a country, we would be number 56, I think. And now I think we're like down to number 76 or something like that. And so it's not that we're getting worse, it's that other countries are getting better. So now there is Cuba, Taiwan, and then the United States. So my first question was, based on everything I knew as a woman living in the United States and seeing this difference in Cuba, how did that happen? How did that happen? So before I say the research, is that's why I'm wearing the jacket and traveling on that license, because I have to be careful that if I want to do this work, that I can't break any rules, because this is really, really something serious. If you think about the number 1 person on the terrorist list for the United States before 9/11 was Assata. And so I don't want to be in the position of breaking rules and making problems bigger than I already have for family, friends, or people that associate with me. So I've been taking people to Cuba to do this research work for 20 some odd years. And it's like, this is the way I am introduced in Cuba. And now, thanks to you, Dr. Amina, it's with I am also an ambassador. And this is one of the things that an ambassador can do, is to make deeper friendship and relationship between colleagues. Because I feel, and when I testified before Congress, I said, if we're having this problem in the United States that embarrasses us so we don't even want to release the data anymore, and there is a place where women and babies are living, it's our responsibility to go there and see what we can learn from them in order to save ourselves. If we don't give ourselves permission to go there and learn as much as we can about what Cuba is doing when they are being more successful than we are in so many areas, I consider that, saying out loud, we're buying into genocide. Because we all know that doing something, identifying maternal and child health when a woman is pregnant, that's way after the train has left the station. We know that the most important variable in terms of birth outcome is not what happens to you when you're pregnant, but what happened to you before you got pregnant. What happened to you before you got pregnant? And so my first research project really set the tone for my work, for the ongoing work, in the sense that I was joking before about the nesting. But in actuality, the thing that stresses women out the least in Cuba and the most in the United States is a sense of a place called home, a sense of belonging, a sense of it is safe enough to drop that hormone that's going to allow me to drop this baby. It's about that simple. And so what I am learning and what students are learning that are going to Cuba, and we usually have about 4 groups that go every year from different universities, from different perspectives, is really looking at what makes a person feel like they belong. What gives, so Cuba, for example, has the highest literacy rate in the Western Hemisphere. That's higher than Canada, higher than the US, and higher than Central and South America. And Cuba is 66% African-based. That goes against everything that we know about our Black people capable of learning. Mm-hmm. 2, Cuba has one of the lowest rates of violence on the planet. That goes against everything that we know about Black people. Cuba is also a developing country, which goes against what we have been taught, that you have to have money in order to survive. Cuba has been really clear in defining the United Nations votes for the end of a blockade against Cuba every year, primarily because of what Cuba is modeling, the advantage of a human resource versus a financial resource. And so those are all the things that you don't think about in terms of looking at maternal care and fetal mortality and morbidity. Mm-hmm. In the sense of, so the data, that statistic I gave you is there. You know, the Cuba has better birth outcomes than the United States. In the last census and the data we collected, the United States overall is losing years. People have lost 2 years of their life overall for the first time, and Cuba gained. So we're looking at what is it? What is that thing that keeps people living and taking care of each other in spite of the economic, social, and political circumstances? So when we're doing research, we're not just counting the transactional part, but now we're forced to look at the impact of culture on birth outcomes, the sense of belonging, how do you define it, the sense of trusting a healthcare system that advertises medicine as commercials. And I would say that everything that exists in Cuba that's beneficial exists in the United States, but it's not universal, and it's not necessarily accessible, and it's not necessarily culturally competent. Does that answer your question?
It does, and it actually brings up so many others because it allows me to understand that there's, of course, more to this in what it is that is attributed. Sometimes I think, we do things in Western medicine, and it's truly an exercise in fertility, because when we think that we're doing something in such a grand manner, we see statistics like this, and we, you scratch our head, like, how does such a small country that is so mystified with the unknown, that the known in what they're doing is so much greater? You mentioned the literacy rates, the birthing rates. I remember as a midwife coming into the area of Atlanta, trying to bring more home births forward. And I remember doing the first doula program there, and it was amazing. We had a 10-week, a 5-week, and we had a midwives apprentice program, and it was amazing. It was pushed back by certain energies, but it was an amazing feat to be able to have that, and knowing that there was an educational piece to this. I fell into the understanding that, that safety you spoke about, how women wanted to have a home birth, but their abuser lives with them, and to know that she is pregnant by the abuser and not really wanting to be, but she had a choice between birthing the first 5 and aborting this last one. And she had to choose that under the guise of living with this abuser, yet still wanting to have a natural and more homeopathic birth. And there was, I call it, and this is my term, it's nothing tangible, but I call it her cortisol moment. And that moment when she realized that there's stress within her that is cultivating in other parts of her body, and thus into the baby. And that cortisol moment for her was that she's stressed out because she doesn't know if she's going to have a space to live in, let alone where to bring a baby. And you were very eloquent when you spoke about that in Cuba, how that is that's not even a extra thought, let alone a forethought, in society, and how so impressed, and in knowing that that's something that we can't even appreciate here in the United States. We're supposed to be the land of opportunity and industry, but we don't even have the bandwidth to even understand how home is truly our sanctuary, unless it's a corporate structure or unless it's some kind of business model that we can, get a lower interest rate on, like we can't even understand it.
I think we're now in the worst of times, which oftentimes becomes the best of times.
I agree.
We're at a place of opportunity to learn because we're pushed against the wall.
Mm.
And so now we're talking about the social determinants of health, for example. And I think a lot about this in my ambassador role in terms of what FIRE is doing overall.
Okay.
FIRE is training and supporting new ambassadors to go and do this work in their own communities all over the world. That's what you and FIRE are doing. And so this is an opportunity for us to think about how we approach problems. So in the United States, for example, we're just beginning to look at the social determinants of health.
Absolutely.
And my doctors, now I have 250 doctors, I call them my baby doctors on the ground, that have graduated from medical school in Cuba and are all over and cutting up all over the United States. Thank you. Their biggest frustration is the miseducation and lack of education for people in the United States. Our education, our population is not, we don't have, our education system needs to be improved.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so when I talked about the social determinant of education, it's like people, in order to take advantage of health, anything that you're going to do to support them, they need, first of all, a place to stay.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be, there are very few unhoused people in Cuba. There's a UN statement that says last night, 1 million children slept on the streets, but not one of them slept on the streets in Cuba.
See?
Everyone has a house. You might not like your house because it has your relatives in it or whatever, but everybody has a house. This is a designated place where you're supposed to be and lay your head down when nighttime comes.
Awesome.
Everyone has free education, but that's not unique to Cuba. We're just one of the few countries where people pay for higher education. And everyone has health care. And we are maybe the only developed country that has not signed the Declaration of Human Rights, that healthcare is a human right.
Correct.
And so when you have those 4 things, and I'm saying that because we're training ambassadors to go back and do this work, it's like, what is the foundation that you're looking at wherever you are and whatever you're doing? If you're going to make the situation better, you can't do it in a vacuum. Okay. And so you're looking at the bigger picture, not just the one thing that you're interested in. And so I applaud you for doing that and for giving people an opportunity to learn these things so that they can go back and actually be effective all over the world like you're doing.
Yeah, and thank you. We're going to segue into that because a couple of students have a couple of questions. But the next question is, as a new ambassador for Cuba and the CARICOM, give us a few things.
I didn't hear that.
You froze, Dr. Amina. Can you hear me, Ambassador Kathryn?
I can hear you.
I put a question in the chat. I was just wondering if people other than students can go on your trips to Cuba.
Yes, there are
Okay.
yes, but there's two
Thank
ways.
you.
Yes, because we're waiting for her to come back. So I'll talk to you about that.
Of course. Of course.
I'm on faculty at Charles Drew University in Compton Watts, made my way back home. And I only do all things Cuban. And one of the things they do is offer a continuing education for stakeholders.
Okay.
Stakeholders, and remember, Cuba thinks everything is public health, to actually take the class. It's a 2-week class. And to do an immersion course in Cuban public health from any perspective that we're interested in. It could be mental health, it could be emergency services, and whatever. So that's one. The other thing is we have an ongoing maternal and child health collaborative. We're getting ready to go in November. Sister Fia is going to be a part of that class. And that is totally looking at the Cuba public health system from the maternal and child health perspective. Cuba has made it possible for me to be an ad hoc member of PAHO. I did not even understand that there was a public health association other than the American Public Health Association, but we actually are part of a region, and there's a Pan-American Health Organization that is available, and countries in the Americas are really working together to develop some amazing things now, but the US is just not a part of it because we're just not a part of it. So there's that perspective of looking at ourselves from a regional perspective and not just like our neighborhood or our country. Our country is part of something that's much bigger than just our country. And now for the first time, I'm actually streaming the UN because in the general sessions, because of Dr. Amina and FIRE and being a UN affiliated organizations, we get to have sessions there. We get to be a part of what's going on. And the biggest surprise to me is how many opportunities there are for young people to be a part of what's going on in world health, but we just don't know about it. So you could count the number of young people in the United States who are of color, who are a part of the internships and the opportunities to be a part of a global public health system where you're not the recipient of somebody coming to help you, but you are a part of working with other people. It's about learning how to work with other people, not telling other people what to do, but learning how to work with other people to help identify and solve global issues.
Thank you so much. I'll follow up. It's exciting. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you. See, I tell you, when you put women in this venue, I tell you, things will still get done. So thank you so very much for my pro-par. I think my internet went out and then the live streams went out and all of them were just ding, 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 ding. Like, Dr. Mina, what happened? So we're back up. And thank you so very much for keeping the conversation going. We do have a few minutes left, and I'm going to get to some of these questions because some of the kids are just really texting me about it. I had another question, but again, I guess I got to get to the Q&A right now. And thank you, Your Excellency, for coming in. I want to recognize a few people here that I did not recognize. There are quite a few here. Of course, there's Papa Trujillo. We have to say it first. Hello, Papa. How are you? Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being here. There is Dr. Agnes Mwanza. She is a gender and human rights to-be chaplain from Zambia. She's from Zambia, and she is here today, and she's representing her entire cohort. We have Dr. Linda Brooks, who is also of that cohort. She is also a chaplain. She is studying in Harbor Heritage University, might I say. And we are developing so many new and aspiring talents, but both Dr. Dr. Agnes and Dr. Brooks is one of our most recent chaplains, and they are going to be making sure that this message is abroad. So we have Zambia, of course, as we mentioned, we have the United States, but there's going to be other jurisdictions that they're going to be going into. We have 2 chaplains now that have brought it to Dimona, Israel. So they brought it back as Christians in their own right, and they are Old Testament Christians, as she calls her group. And so they brought it back to Israel. So I see this as a great universal opening. But Queen Mother, let me ask you this question, and this is from a student in Fordham University. Opening a plan that's thematic now, that will be actualized hopefully in the summer of 2024. How do you see religion playing a part in this, or houses of worship? I should say houses of worship, because some of them are not religions, they are ways of life. So how do you see houses of worship opening up to helping or supporting Cuba in this mission? How do you see them fitting?
That's a very interesting question, because last year we, as in the United States, declared Cuba a country that does not support religious freedom.
Okay.
Cuba has the most diverse organization of association of religions in the whole world.
Wow.
In fact, the president of the association is a Babalao.
Oh, wow.
You know, when
About spirit.
I started off working on my doctorate in sociology, and I wanted to do global work. And no advisor at the university where I was would take me on, I think because I was a Black.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like confusing, because we're just not welcome in that sphere of global work, and people don't have I'm not saying they don't have the goodwill, but they don't have the experience and the knowledge. It's a road we haven't traveled. And
Right.
so actually I ended up getting my doctorate in divinity, but it was very, very hard to find a university in the United States that just wasn't rooted in the Big Four.
Mm.
So I found the only university in California at that time, it's not even in existence, that was recognized and certified, that was open to indigenous communities or whatever.
Yes.
So
Yes.
what I'm saying is that a lot of the work, like I'm actually with Pastors for Peace, interfaith religious organization. That's who sponsors the American Medical School program.
Yes.
And we're housed at the Martin Luther King Jr. Center in Havana.
Okay.
And there's the Ebenezer Baptist Church right there.
Okay.
So I would say that Cuba is open to
Mhm.
anyone that wants to support what the Cubans want and how they see practicing their religion, that's supporting them the way they want to do it, is welcome to come and support them in what it is that they're doing.
Yes, ma'am.
You
Yes,
know,
ma'am.
the Jewish community should love Cuba, because
Yes.
the story, when no other country would let that ship in that was going from country to country, Cuba was the very first country
Absolutely.
that allowed the Jewish people to come and have a safe place to harbor. You know, so when you look at the diversity of it, yes, everyone is welcome to support what the people of Cuba want for themselves and how they see themselves.
Absolutely. 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 And I thank you for that. We're going to segue to that next question. And that's going to come from NYU. We have a student at NYU that asked, basing on diversity, because this is more, one was religion, this is more diversity and accessibility. There is capacity building for Cuba. Is there a way that we can campaign that capacity building in maternal care and make it a silo for the project? So I guess she's asking, how do we condense instead of macro, we're at the micro level for a Cuban project?
I'm sorry, to help
Build
the Cubans or to help the Cubans help the US?
No, no, the US students are coming over to Cuba and they're wanting to find how do you build capacity for maternal care for the students that are coming, like, in other words, how could they bring that to bring their allegiance to Cuba in the capacity build? What could they offer, or what can they bring? What can they, yeah.
Y'all and those big words. Okay.
Sorry. Sorry. I apologize. You're right.
Okay, I think I have it. So what we are doing, for example, with the Maternal and Child Health Collaborative,
Yes, ma'am.
we are doing real research and we're going to do real publishing, which
Okay.
will give our Cuban colleagues an opportunity to be involved in documenting the work that they're doing and having a voice in saying it.
Okay.
So I am actually surprised at the number of universities that partner with Cuba for all kinds of things. And so that's one thing that a university can do. The states like California and maybe Wisconsin, I'm not sure about Wisconsin and Minnesota, have, but several states have resolutions against the blockade because people in the healthcare community want to partner with Cuba around the medical work that they're doing. There are
Okay.
people who want to partner around the cultural stuff that they're doing. And so it's a way of the historical stuff that they're doing around, telling the story of the Americas or whatever. So universities have the opportunity to actually partner with Cuba and the universities there. One of the last things that Obama did as he was leaving office is he signed an agreement between the U.S. Public Health Service and the Cuban Ministry of Health.
Nice.
And so what I'm saying is partnership opportunities are certainly available.
Yes, and that's what I think the students are looking for, because if they're going to start a project, it's especially if they're coming under what we're doing now, they can't just start something and leave. They have to have an aftercare, and they definitely have to have a continuation to this. They can't just come in and just say, oh, we're going to do this for the summer and then just leave and then come back and take all of the knowledge back with them and then just use it for their own good. And that's one of the things that we are looking forward to with our students, is to make sure that they have continuous and repeatable programs that they can not only bring to Cuba, but maybe with Maritza and go to the DR, and that could be the next stop, and use that as the platform for the pilot programs. But our last question before your gems is speaking to the indigenous people, and these are both the Native indigenous and as well as the Black indigenous, and those are tribes that are very, very seldom spoken to, and these are those tribes, like you say, with the Babalaos and culturally indigenous people. Offer us a way that we can be inclusive in our programming. And the question says, how can we develop a outline? And I guess they're asking for just bullet points, a couple of points, that we can include the indigenous communities in the Cuban program that we are developing. So I guess they're asking, maybe one is there a need? And then what is the indigeny there that would be of need or of service to?
I would say that Cubans pay homage to the indigenous people who were there first.
Right.
One of the but who are not there in large numbers
anymore. Correct.
Anymore.
Correct. That's here in the United States, and that's the bigger piece. That's the bigger push.
Yes, and so it gives me, I'm just like in awe that the woman who started one of the major research institutes in Cuba has now relocated from that major research institute to a research institute in Matanzas, which is considered like one of the cultural homelands, is one of the entry points for Africans, but it's also a homeland for indigenous people, and really integrating the medicines and the knowings about medicine and healing into the curriculum of what's being taught in medical school. And that goes back to what you said in the beginning about how you were seen as not having an MD, so it couldn't have been real medicine. But stepping into why Cuba has that COVID medicine, you know, where the best of times and the worst of times, you're forced to do your own. And guess what? It's better than anything that Pfizer came up with. Cuba has the HerbaPro, which last year, half of the people in the United States who had amputations, had they had access to that medicine, they would also have access to their limbs. You know, and so it's the idea when the question that's embedded in the question is not necessarily about the people, but the knowings and the acceptance of what they have to offer, even if there's one left. The other thing is that I would invite you would almost have to come and see for yourself how African Cuba is, and the stories that are woven into, you know, how George Washington threw the stone across the bridge or wherever the river, you know, the other stories that people have that say this is who we are and this is what our history is, and this is what we call the Almighty.
Yes.
All of that is so woven into public health. That, of course, if you're doing public health, people also learn how to keep their altars safe.
Okay.
And so I'm saying that, yes, those things are there. And that's a part of going and experiencing something, not just the transactional part of reading about it, you know, but actually going and seeing the impact and how people live on. There's ancestors are not gone.
No.
And as long as there is one person left to tell the story, or you say that person's name and salute them and include them in what you're doing. And I'm looking at Maritza now, who does Afro Mundo, who helps us remember wherever we end up, you know, where we came from and where we're trying to get to. That's how you include those people.
Yeah, I see the lighting up when you mention it. Mother Maritza, of course, is from the Dominican Republic, and she is doing this work. And we have those, of course, because it is National Hispanic Month. They have those that are from the DR that are asking, are you gonna, some of the questions are you gonna take this to the DR? Are you gonna take this to the DR? You know, we're below Haiti, and one of them even said we're Afro-Cuban and Afro-DR. These are some of the questions that are coming through. And they're making mention to this because they want to see the connection, and they want to hone into that connection and honor that ancestrally. So I thank you for that. And I thank you for all the questions. Of course, we don't have time for all of them, but I did want to, in closing, ask you, Queen Mother, in your wisdom, in your infinite wisdom, from all that you've done and all the little pieces that are making your stained glass for in your golden years, what is a gem that you can give the young folks, even the ones coming behind me? What are some of the things that you can tell them, or pieces of wisdom that they can have as far as their travels and their wantings to help and be of service? Give us something that they can take home.
Actually, one of the best things that has happened to me, and a lot of wonderful things have happened to me. I'm very grateful for all, and most of them have been, they've come in the form of people that have come into my life, you know, and taught me a lesson that I've remembered, whether I liked it or didn't like it.
Okay.
But it's like looking at the world as a great teacher. And what am I learning from this? What am I learning from this? And one of the things that I heard Fidel say is the understanding that how important language is. Language is the carrier of culture. And how we can get stuck. I think he really talked about we could get stuck on you saying this is a table, and someone else says no es una mesa. Both are telling the truth. And so it's the idea of being open to people are looking at the same thing and maybe calling it by a different name. But once we understand that, it opens up communication. And that appears to be one of the biggest problems that we have. I was thinking this morning about what is it that I can do across communication.
Mhm.
I could help any woman, I don't care where she's from, have a baby.
That's right.
We don't need to have a common language. We don't need to have a common nothing except a common understanding that we're about to have this baby. And what is it going to take to help her birth this child?
Mhm.
And so the idea of expanding our ability to communicate is one of the, I think, the greatest lessons that I'm working on.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. And I, you know what? I have to hear that. And as my grandmother used to say, hear it with both your ears and all your mind. And she used to say that because it's something you internalize. You may not use it now, but you're going to use it later, and that's why that all your mind comes in. But I think she said that in the same energy that you're giving this now. You know that first of all, there's a place and a space for all work to be done. And I think just in congruency with what it is you want to do, there's always people out there that need it to be done. So that's where I feel most proud in what it is that I lead as a mentee to you, as a birth BEARTH child of yours, and holding on to that, you know. And I'm probably that child I got in there and tore up the womb because it was like, oh, she's coming. And I think now in using that as an adage for my work, I'm still going to hold that to be truth to be evident that you are truly an asset to this community. And I thank you. And I can't even find the words with all these words in my head. There's not one that comes out that says thank you enough for all that you do and all that you are, and all of the sisters that I see on the site here today that came in support. You know, we don't have that many that do that, and for them to come and to be here with you and for you and be about you and about the business that you're about. So I say thank you. For those that are at Fordham University, you know how to get in touch with Queen Mother. Please reach out to her on LinkedIn. You're also able to reach out to her on WhatsApp from the number that she gave. Please make sure that you are respectful and courteous, and please make sure that you mention what school you're coming from. For those at NYU that are going to be doing the project in Cuba next year, please reach out to Queen Mother. And if any of the other sisters that are here are willing and wanting to give their information, please give the permission to Queen Mother to be able to reach out to them as well. And please, let's continue this conversation. We are going to be looking to, on the 22nd, I'm not going to be doing it, but because Friday is my Sabbath, but on the 22nd, we're going to have the Portuguese, the Afro-Portuguese that are going to be speaking on the tutelage of how we can be more accepting in our diversity. So that's actually a great one. I can't wait for the replay on that. But in the meantime, Queen Mother, thank you so very much. Of course, as always, we have a gift, a digital gift from Fire that's going to be coming to your mailbox. To Fordham University, I want to thank you, Professor Adams and Abrams. Thank you so very much for bringing them on. For NYU, Professor, excuse me, Professor Chen, thank you so very much for bringing them, the students here. And right now, I'm looking at the tallies, and we have 118 students that have listened to you today, Queen Mother. They have heard your voice. They have known who you are, and they are celebrating you right now. And we said 25, and it's 118 students that heard you. And out of the 118, there were 127, and 118 came to this point right now. So I thank you so very much for keeping their attention, because that's the bigger piece, and holding the mission in your breast. And we thank you. On behalf of the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights, the Cuban Embassy of Fire, as well as the embassies of the CARICOM to be developed, we thank you. We honor you. For those high commissioners, ambassadors, emissaries, diplomats, dignitaries, fellow guests, and of course, those that came in support, I thank you so very much today. And with all rights and respect, we close out this session, thanking each of you on the Zoom for coming. Empress Niamo, I thank you so very much for being here and keeping the project going in our glitch. And we thank you from the DR, Madam Maritza. We thank you so very much for coming and being here and being a part of, and who did I miss? I don't want to miss anyone. Of course, Dr. Brooks, Dr. Agnes.
I saw Dr. Wassam was here, Ambassador Wassam.
Oh, wow, he was here. He's from the United
I
Nations.
wake up to him every morning thinking about the Syrian women.
This is, yes, he is the ambassador to Syria and Lebanon. So yes, thank you so very much for that. I don't see, who else do I see? Afia, Mother Empress Afia, yes, there she is. I don't have you on my screen, but I went through the participants. Thank you so very much for being here today. Thank you for sharing this time. And thank you again, Queen Mother, for being the best part of our team and being here for us. To each of you, this is being recorded, so we will have the recording available to you, even with the glitch. We'll see if we can edit that out, but we'll have the recording available to you both here and on YouTube. So look for that in the future. But thank you again. God bless each and every one of you, and I pray you traveling mercies wherever you are and wherever you're going this week. Be well and take care.